This is the brief on Egypt's latest geopolitical maneuvers regarding the Nile, Israel, and Turkey. So, what's the scoop? Well, according to some new leaks from an Egyptian outlet called 5Ektesad, it looks like Cairo is making some pretty aggressive moves, really shaking things up on its borders and with its water supply. Okay, first up, talks over that huge Ethiopian dam on the Nile, they're back on. Apparently, a U.S. delegation, which even included a top Trump advisor, managed to push Ethiopia back to the table. But Egypt isn't messing around. They want a binding deal on how the dam runs, they want international oversight, and they're demanding a ban on any future dams without their say-so. Now, at the same time, Egypt's military buildup is making some people very nervous. To the east, Israel is reportedly worried that Egypt's military is growing beyond what was agreed to in the old peace treaty. They're especially concerned about Egypt trying to buy advanced F-15 fighter jets. So what are they doing? They're lobbying Washington pretty hard to block the sale, all to keep their own military edge. And finally, in a really interesting twist, old rivals Egypt and Turkey are basically becoming strategic partners. We're not just talking a big jump in trade here. Turkey is actually planning to move 300 factories to Egypt. This whole thing even gets into military cooperation, including maybe even sharing advanced drone tech. So to put it all together, Cairo is using U.S. backing to lock down its water rights, while at the same time building up its military and industrial power through these new alliances. And that's the bottom line on Egypt's current power plays.
Today, we're diving into a really powerful story that's being told about Egypt's big comeback on the world stage. So, that brings us to the big question for today. What does this version of a resurgent, powerful Egypt actually look like? What are the plot points? Who are the main characters, the heroes, the villains? Let's get into it.
All right, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off with the big idea of Egypt's power play. Then, we'll look at a major showdown over the Nile, some rising tensions with a key neighbor, a whole new web of alliances, a peek at friction back home.
Okay, first up, Egypt's power play. See, in this narrative we're looking at, Egypt isn't just another country on the map. Oh no, it's the protagonist, the main character of the story, finally stepping back into the spotlight and reasserting its dominance. Now, to really get what's going on here, you have to understand this one key phrase they use over and over: strategic paper. It's their term for a national asset, something so powerful, like, say, the Suez Canal or a massive army, that it gives you a seat at the big table and forces everyone else to listen. It's basically Egypt's ultimate trump card. So that brings us to the first major conflict in this drama, the super high-stakes diplomatic fight with Ethiopia over their giant dam on the Nile. This isn't just a disagreement. It's presented as a major flashpoint for the whole region.
And what's really fascinating here is how the source frames Egypt's demands. It's not shown as a negotiation. It's Egypt laying down 5 basically non-negotiable terms through American mediators. These aren't just suggestions. They're presented as the new rules of the game for the entire Nile Basin, period.
So you might be asking, how is Egypt supposed to enforce all this? Well, according to this story, the United States is playing the role of the muscle. The narrative claims that American envoys are literally in Ethiopia right now, threatening sanctions and pulling investments to make sure they fall in line. So in this telling, the U.S. isn't some neutral party, it's an ally making sure Egypt gets what it wants. And that brings us to the next big chapter in this story. Because it's not just about water anymore, it's about military power. The whole narrative pivots now to focus on the alarm bells that are supposedly ringing loud and clear in Israel over Egypt's growing army. And to really drive this point home, the source uses a pretty explosive quote that it attributes to Benjamin Netanyahu. He supposedly says that the Egyptian army itself is becoming a strategic paper. There's that term again, and that it's getting dangerously close to crossing a red line. In this story, Israel is definitely cast as the worried rival.
This is the diplomatic tug-of-war as the source tells it. On one side, you have Israel's alleged warnings, it's a threat, it violates peace treaties, you have to sanction them, and on the other side, you have the supposed American response, which basically pats Egypt on the back, calls its army disciplined and responsible, and shuts down Israel's demands.
And the narrative gets super specific about why Israel is so alarmed. It's not just a vague feeling. The source gives us a whole laundry list. A massive military buildup in the Sinai, new airports popping up, secret underground bases, and even elite forces and tanks parked right near the border. It's all framed as a direct violation of old agreements.
Okay, so this leads us perfectly into the next phase of the story. Egypt isn't just getting stronger on its own. Nope. It's also being painted as the center of a whole new and very powerful network of alliances in the region.
Kicking things off is this huge reconciliation with Turkey, a one-time rival. And it's sealed with a massive $5.1 billion investment pledge. In this story, a number like that isn't just about economics. It represents a fundamental shift in the power dynamics of the whole Eastern Mediterranean.
And it doesn't stop with Turkey. The source then points to Saudi Arabia going after a $3 billion arms deal with the U.S., weaving it into this bigger picture that all the regional heavyweights are now getting on the same team.
And this, well, this is the grand finale of this section. The source describes the formation of a brand new Islamic NATO, a gigantic military coalition with Egypt, of course, right at the heart of it all. It's designed, they say, to counter Israel and project a whole new kind of power on the world stage. It's easily the most ambitious claim in the whole narrative.
All right, now the story of this resurgent Egypt, after flexing its muscles all over the world, suddenly turns its focus inward, to a very, very sensitive topic. The source spends a lot of time on what it calls the problem of guests, talking about refugees and migrants. It frames it as another front where national strength has to be shown. We're going to present its perspective very carefully here.
Just so we are crystal clear about where this point of view is coming from, let's look at a direct quote from the source material. It says, "These people are guests on Egyptian land. They have no rights to express their opinions or provoke Egyptians." This quote really sets the tone for everything else that follows on this topic.
The source then lists out a bunch of specific grievances to back up this view. It claims there are millions of these guests creating huge pressure on the economy. It alleges they're taking jobs, they're getting state benefits without contributing things like military service, and that they're engaging in what it calls provocative behavior. Again, it is so important to remember these are the specific claims being made inside the narrative we're analyzing. Okay, so we've walked through all these different chapters, the diplomatic fights, the military flexing, the new alliances, and even the tensions back home.